First things first, the software we're using is Adobe Premiere Pro, but I'll save us time and just call it Premiere from now on. I do need to point out that there's currently another editing app made by Adobe named Premiere Rush, which is a more streamlined, mobile-centric editing app. But we're doing pro things, so we're using the Pro program. Before we start working on our projects, I'd like to show you around and introduce the tools and concepts we'll be using later in the course. I'm also going to call out several of the problems that you've likely run into if you've explored Premiere before on your own. Like I said in the last video, I'm assuming you've got some familiarity with After Effects and maybe other design programs, so I'm tailoring this little tour to folks like you. Maybe you're new to Premiere and to editing specifically, but you'll probably recognize some of the features, and I assume you've done some of these tasks before in other apps. Some of the features will work exactly the way you'd expect, and some will be very different. So I know you'll understand the value in seeing more of the specialty features that a beginner tour wouldn't normally cover. Of course, I can't possibly show you everything, and maybe I'm already showing you too much, but I'm trying to focus on the features I think will be most useful and most exciting to someone like you. There may even be a few things we won't revisit later, but I'm calling them out so you know they exist. Once you know about it, you'll be able to learn more on your own if you want to. All right, enough talk, let's hop in. When you first open Premiere, you'll be greeted with this screen, and look, it even knows my name because I'm signed in to Creative Cloud, of course. Down here, it has any recent projects you've been working on. You can sort those in a variety of ways and even filter them with search terms if you want. And then across the top and here with this little light bulb icon, you can click any of those to do additional tutorials and learn more about the software. But that's why you're here to listen to me right now, right? We'll come up to this blue button that says New Project and click that to get started. If this is your first time in Premiere, you'll be greeted with this footage. Or you can click this little sample media right here that's probably been favorited for you by Adobe. Helpful of them. We'll begin up here in the top corner by giving our project a name, New Project. Then you'll come over here and choose a location for it. Any recent locations will be in this list, or you can click Choose Location. It'll open up your file browser. You know what to do. Now, Premiere is assuming that you probably already have some footage that you want to use to create your project. So if that's the case, you can browse around right here, choose some of those clips, and use those to create this project. You don't need to do this, but it is a common workflow. I'll go ahead and just choose a couple of these clips, and whoa, look at that. I can actually preview them right here just by scrubbing over the clips. I'm not clicking anything. This is called Hover Scrub, and you're going to find this in several places throughout Premiere. Let's go ahead and choose that clip, and this clip, and this clip. Up here, you have the option to change the thumbnail size, and you get various sorting and filtering tools, which is useful if you have a lot of assets and only need to bring in a few of them. You can sort by file type or even use a search bar to narrow things down. Over here on the right, you have a variety of options. If you want to go ahead and create a sequence right off the bat, you can do that here and even name it. If you want it to automatically transcribe those clips, you can have it create bins. You can have it copy media from another location so it lives with this new project file that you're creating. So before you even start, you get a decent amount of options just to decide how everything's set up. Once you're ready in here, you can come down here and choose Create. Like other multimedia apps, most of what you'll be doing in here relies on files that live somewhere on your hard drive, and they're just being referenced by Premiere. So it's up to you to make sure that you keep track of everything. If you move or delete a file, Premiere won't know where it is. So you have to be organized and keep track of your media. That said, if you do end up having to relink something, I find Premiere to be a much friendlier place to do that. Video clips often come out of the camera with these very kind of gibberish looking names, and they'll often have a very specific folder structure, and you don't want to mess with either of these. We'll have opportunities to rename the files inside Premiere. I also want to take a second and point out that video files are really, really big. This project you're looking at here has raw footage that was easily over a terabyte. So just keep in mind that if you do pick up a project that has a lot of video footage, you may end up needing more hard drive space than you're used to for graphics projects. You'll see that our layout here looks generally pretty familiar. You have a place with your stuff, a place to look at what you're working on, a timeline down here, and then other specialized panels. Just like After Effects, you can resize any of these by just clicking right between them, and then you can drag things around. If you want to reorganize any of these, you can just grab a panel and drop it on top of somewhere else. If you want to save that new workspace, come back up to Window, Workspaces, Save as New Workspace. To maximize any panel, you just select it, hit the tilde or accent grave key, and it will maximize that panel. This works for
your viewer, your timeline, whatever you need.
We're going to start out by looking at the project panel, and I'll apologize in advance if I show you a few features that you end up wishing we had over in After Effects. Of course, this panel is just where all of your stuff lives. We have a few clips here, and we have a sequence, which is what these are called here in Premiere. Right now we're in list view, and so this looks pretty much like After Effects, right? If you want to organize this, you can create folders right here. They're actually called bins, but you can create a bin and put your stuff in it like that. Of course, importing things is probably the most important part here. You already saw one way to import, but there are, of course, several. You can double click somewhere in the empty area here, and you'll end up in your file browser where you can import items. You can go to File, Import, and navigate through your file browser. Or, of course, my personal favorite, you can just drag files or folders directly in from your file browser, and Premiere will actually respect that existing structure, including subfolders. List view is certainly useful, but there are some other great options in here.
If you come down to the bottom of the panel, you can switch to icon view, where you can see thumbnails of everything in the project. You can make these bigger if you want. And remember that hover scrub that we had earlier? Look at this. This is actually my sequence here, the timeline that's open down below. And you can see that I can hover scrub right here, as well as look at each of these clips. There's also another view called Freeform, which initially looks like the same thing, except you can actually drag these around. So here's my sequence. I'm going to move that out of the way. And you can actually start storyboarding based on just your clips if you want to.
I personally love this view. It's really great to be able to freely arrange things however you like. I'm sure we've all gotten projects with scripts that are looser than we'd like, and being able to tangibly storyboard things out with your actual media is super helpful. You can rename your assets right in here by slowly double-clicking on one of them. I'm just going to recklessly rename this Clip 1, and every time you hit Enter, it moves you down to the next item. Yeah. Or you can hit Tab to move to the next column horizontally. And that's not so useful in this layout right now, but if we're in icon view, it's much more helpful. Enter moves down, Tab moves to the right. Of course, when you're naming your clips for real, the names should be meaningful for both you and your team. Editors in particular tend to have a very specific way of naming files, but it can vary a lot by team and even by project. Never be afraid to just ask what someone else prefers. I already showed you bins, or folders if you prefer. You can create one of those from this icon down here by right-clicking in the empty area and choosing New Bin. Or if you like the long way, you can come up to File, New, Bin, or just hit Control or Command B. Of course, you can also grab a group of assets and drag them down to the bin icon to create and nest those at the same time. To remove items from a bin, just drag them back out. I do want to point out that even though you can drag those existing folder structures into Premiere, once it's in here, that becomes independent from what's on your hard drive. So you can rename and reorganize the project panel however you like, but that organization only exists here in Premiere. Once you've created a bin, you can double click on it to open it, but it will actually open in a new tab. This can be useful if you want to be able to keep it separate, or you could even tear this off and look at them side by side. But I'd often rather just be able to open that in place. You can do that by holding Control or Command and double clicking. Now it just replaces the panel and takes you into that bin. To go back one level to your main project panel, just click this little upward arrow folder icon up here. If you'd like to change this behavior, you can go to Preferences General and customize that setting right here. One of my favorite things about Premiere's project panel is the amount that you can customize the information you see, especially in list view. In addition to bins, you can also use color coding to keep track of your assets. Premiere colors things by default based on asset type, but you can always recolor these yourself by right-clicking, choosing a label, and selecting a new color. These are also available under the Edit menu if you prefer. To customize even further, you can look under the Preferences, Labels, and you'll be able to rename, change the available color choices, and change the default labeling. Now, I'll go ahead and maximize my project panel and show you all the info we get. You can sort by any of these columns, and that's nice, but even if you were a full-time editor, this all might not be necessary or relevant to you. But luckily, we can customize this too. Let's come over here to Description, and we'll just drag that column back over to the left, so we'll be able to see it once we collapse this panel back down to its normal size. You'll see some of these assets already have descriptions because they're stock assets. You can always add your own or customize these. The renaming works the same as the clip names did.
Let's open that back up. There are some other columns in here that can be really handy depending on the kind of project you're working on. There's lots of technical info that you may or may not care about, but you can quickly mark good takes or even hide assets. But if you wish you had another specific column that you don't see, guess what? Right-click somewhere in this title row, click on Metadata Display, and now you can add a ton of other fields. Video usage, for example, tells you whether or not a clip has been used. Handy. If you don't see what you're looking for, you can actually click New Schema to create new groups and totally custom columns.
Sure, that's a lot, but if you ever need it, it's nice to have it. I know I've spent a lot of time on the project panel, but keeping your projects tidy is always good practice, and I'm hoping that you're already seeing some things that look useful and you're excited to learn more. While we're on the subject of useful things that you might wish you had in After Effects,
you can actually have multiple Premiere projects open at once. Notice this up here, Project, New Project, and Project PR for Motion KH01. Looky there, it's me filming this course right now. And if you look down below, I actually have multiple timelines open. This is from my new project. This is from that other project.
And this is super handy because you can copy paste or even just drag elements between projects. Of course, that means you really need to pay attention to what you're doing. And if you're planning on having multiple projects open, you can't get away with leaving things named Sequence 1. All right, time for the timeline where the magic happens. We'll cover this stuff more closely in the later lessons, but let's do a quick overview and see some possibilities. Once you have clips on a timeline, you can play and pause using the spacebar. Home and end work pretty much like you'd expect. Jump to the beginning or end of your timeline. Left and right arrows allow you to move frame by frame, and adding shift will let you jump 10 frames at a time. You can also use the up and down arrows to jump to the previous or next edit point on targeted tracks. I'll talk more about what that means in a minute. You can simply drag this blue cursor, called a current time indicator or CTI, along this top bar area to scrub around, or you can come over here to the timecode display and scrub that. If you don't have any clips selected, you can also just type in timecode to jump to that exact frame. Using the keys at the top of your keyboard, you can zoom out with minus or zoom in with plus. You can also zoom by holding Alt or Option and using your scroll wheel. You can use your scroll wheel by itself to move back and forth along the timeline, or you can hit H to switch over to the hand tool and use that to free drag along the timeline. And like a lot of functions in here, you can actually do these while the timeline is playing. Now, I'm going to switch over to another sequence so we can talk about tracks, which are similar to the layer arrangement that you're used to, but they're different in some interesting ways as well. As you've probably already noticed, multiple clips can share the same track, which is really crucial for editing. You're able to drag clips around with or without affecting the rest of the timeline, and you can freely manipulate these edit points, at least as far as this media actually exists. You can resize tracks by dragging on the little lines in between, or by holding Alt or Option and using your scroll wheel. As a track gets bigger, you can see thumbnails for each clip, and on audio tracks, you can get a better view of the waveform. You can name your tracks if you like, and as you'll see from this more complex timeline, if you take advantage of using certain tracks for certain types of assets, you can actually use this as another organizational strategy along with color coding. Video tracks do kind of work like the layers you're expecting. If one clip is on a higher track at the same time as another clip, you'll see only the top one, unless you change the visibility or size, in which case you'll see the content on the tracks below. You have these familiar eyeball switches to disable an entire track, but you can also disable just individual clips. Clips can hold their own keyframes, which you can actually create directly on the timeline. I'm changing the opacity here. But audio layers can also have track-level keyframes and track-level effects, which would affect all the clips you add to this same track. Cool, right? Okay, next I'd like to point out something that trips a lot of people up. Let's talk for a minute about these weird blue buttons on the left side. For simple projects, you can mostly ignore these, but if you're running into trouble, knowing what these actually do can probably save you a lot of frustration. The buttons on the left are called the source patch. When you add a clip to this timeline, the source patch determines where the video and audio from that clip will go. The clip I have selected has one video track and one audio track. So right now, V1 of that clip is aimed at V1 on the timeline, and A1 of that clip is aimed at A1 on the timeline. When I add this clip, it goes to V1 and A1. Let's set these to V3 and A2 and add that clip again. Or I could set this to V2 and disable the audio patch. Now when I add the clip, it pushes only the video and no audio at all. This next row of buttons is called track targeting, and this is more for the timeline functions we'll be using, like certain trimming tools, or if I disable V1 here and then use my up and down arrows to jump to edit points again. Aha! Notice how it's ignoring the edits on V1? You may have also noticed that clips are being automatically selected as I scrub over that point in the timeline. But since V1 is disabled right now, that track isn't being selected. That's another of the functions that track targeting controls. And by the way, if you don't like that feature, you can turn it off under Sequence, Selection Follows Playhead. Let's turn that back on. And we can also lock a track, whether it's one clip or multiple clips, meaning we could do ripple edits that move the whole rest of the timeline, but that locked track will be unaffected. Again, we'll do more of this later, but there are also different ways to actually add things to the timeline. And of course, these depend on that patching I just showed you. You can overwrite, which just plops the clip down and covers up whatever was there before. Or you can insert, which will shove the rest of the timeline down to make space for this new thing. While we have this clip here, by default, anytime you drag a clip around on the timeline, the audio and video are going to stay connected. But you can always unlink that if you need to and manipulate them separately. Starting to see the power here? Excited to get in here yourself? Good. One more cool thing. Like I showed you earlier, you can have multiple timelines open from one project or multiple projects, so you could easily copy-paste between them. Or you can even use a technique called timeline stacking or pancaking, which lets you drag clips directly from one timeline into another. Ooh, so again, probably more than you needed to know right now, but I like getting people excited about possibilities, and hopefully you're seeing a lot of those. Speaking of which, I need to show you the viewers or monitors where you'll actually be seeing what you're working on. And yes, there's more than one. Your program monitor shows you what's on your timeline and will always stay in sync with the timeline you have selected. If you look closely, you'll notice the timecode and CTI are matching as I scrub around the timeline, which you can also do directly from the monitor itself. You have more options in here, of course. You can actually change the size of the content within this display, but I would leave this set to fit. You can also change the quality over here, but I would leave this set to full unless you're having playback issues. We have several buttons here, and most of these we'll learn shortcuts for, but if you just really love clicking a play button, there it is. You might notice I have a button that isn't in your interface, and that's because, yet again, we can customize this. If you click this little plus button down here, you can add something, say a button to show rulers. You can just drag that out and drop it wherever you like. If you change your mind, just drag it back out and it's gone. This monitor is mostly just for looking at your content, but you can also work directly in here once you start adding text or moving clips around using the transform controls. Those of you that are design inclined might be happy to know that you can indeed add rulers and guides in here. With the program monitor selected, hit Ctrl or Command R to bring up rulers. You can drag guides out of these just like you'd expect. Once you've created a guide, you can right-click and choose Edit Guide if you want to be really precise, or you can generate specific layouts. Right-click on the ruler itself to choose between pixels and %, or choose Add Guide to create guides at specific positions. So you can make your own rule of thirds grid or any other grid, and you're even able to save and apply guide templates. We've actually had another monitor hiding back here all along, the source monitor, which you'll see is currently blank. If I double-click a clip from my project panel, it will load up in the source monitor. You use this to review this clip and then select the portions of it you'd like to add to the timeline, rather than adding the entire clip and having to trim it down there. So on this clip, for example, I might just want this one pan toss. So I'll scrub up here, set what's called an in and out point. And now when I add this to the timeline, it only adds this portion of the clip, even though all the rest of it is still available if I wanted it. All right, organize your stuff, put it on a timeline and move it around. Look at it. Those are the big ones. Let's quickly check out a few of the other important panels that we'll be touching later in the course. Down in the bottom right, we have an audio meter, which shows you the output level of your combined audio tracks, so you can make sure they're loud enough, but not too loud. While it doesn't normally live in this Essentials workspace, we've also got an audio track mixer, where we can easily change the volume of each track, as well as add track level effects. In the top right, you'll see the effect controls, and as of Premiere 2025, you'll also have a properties panel. Anytime you have a clip selected in your timeline, these panels will fill up with contextual controls to change basic things about that clip. Every video clip has these properties like position, anchor point, scale, rotation, and an opacity control. And as of 2025, crop is also built right in. As I'm recording this, the properties panel is still pretty new, so I'm sure that we'll see it continue to evolve. You'll notice that many of the same properties appear in both of these panels. Right now, I consider properties to be good for quick adjustments as you're working, while effect controls gives you more detail and the ability to see and work with keyframes. Once you start adding actual effects to your clips, that's where those controls will live as well. When you're working with generated text, shapes, or other graphics, those controls will also appear in the properties panel. Again, it's contextual, so the controls that are visible will depend on what you have selected. You can use the Graphics Templates panel to browse available motion graphics templates, either locally or on Adobe Stock, and once you add them to your timeline, those controls will also become available in the Properties panel. If you're in Premiere 2024 or earlier, the Essential Graphics panel has the functions of both Properties and Graphics Templates panels combined in one place. The Essential Sound panel gives you easy options to apply mixing and other properties to audio layers based on type. If this is dialogue, I can choose that option and then pick from a list of suggested presets and adjustable properties that are most relevant to that type of audio. For this Lumetri color panel, I'm actually going to change over to the color workspace. Now we can make all kinds of specific color adjustments per clip and apply LUTs if you're using those, as well as see these fancy scopes that give us technical information about the image as we're making these changes. Okay, that's enough for now. Let's finish up with a few quick preferences that are helpful to know about. Under General, I already showed you that bin behavior, but there's a few useful other things in here, like at startup, you could automatically open the last project you were working on. Your autosave should be turned on by default, but it's good to make sure, and you can customize where those files go. Like After Effects, Premiere has a media cache it uses to build previews once you start using effects or layering up a lot of clips. I'd recommend pointing this to a fast drive with plenty of free space. Under Timeline, you can customize how some of that navigation works if you don't like the defaults, as well as change the duration for transitions and still images you add to the timeline. That will come in handy on our first project. I'll be throwing a lot of keyboard shortcuts at you, and we've made a PDF with a lot of the best ones. But if you forget, want to find others, want to customize, you can look under keyboard shortcuts to see or search for any of the functions. And you can customize these to your heart's content and even match the shortcut schemes for other popular editing apps. I hope this little tour was helpful and got you excited to try out some of these features for yourself. I bet you already saw a couple things you wish you'd known about sooner, and maybe a few you wish we had in After Effects, right? Okay, it's time for us to dive into a real project and start putting some of this new knowledge to use.